For 4 days, the world has been watching, waiting and praying for a miracle. But tonight has time and hope finally run out for the Titanic 5. Good evening and welcome to a special programme focusing on the search for the missing Titan submersible. Now, within the past couple of hours, we've heard that debris has been found. That may obviously be hugely significant tonight. There are reports it could be from the Titan itself. We'll have more on that throughout the programme, and we're going to be staying on air this evening to bring you a live update from the US Coast Guard. We expect that to come at 8 o'clock. Now, on board the Titan, as I'm sure you're aware, are 5 men aged between 19 and 77, including a father and his teenage son, a dedicated explorer, a former French Navy diver and the boss of the company who owns the sub. They had dived to the depths of the North Atlantic to view the wreck of the Titanic on the ocean floor on Sunday. All contact was lost just over 90 minutes later. And so began the race against time to try and find them. The oxygen inside that small sub was estimated to run out at lunchtime today. Tonight we'll be joined by special guests with unique insight into deep-sea exploration, search and rescue missions as well, and by people who've met some of those caught up in this extraordinary story. Also on the programme, more on the passengers lost at sea for 4 desperate days. The latest on that incredible search operation which has made headlines around the globe. We'll try and answer some of the questions which continue to swirl around the company behind the trip. The magic of the Titanic, why the lure of the world's most famous shipwreck endures more than a century on. And from the depths of the ocean to the edge of space, the rise of extreme exploration, but at what cost? So all that to come, but as we said, there has been an update, some breaking news in the last couple of hours. It's a developing story about that debris found on the ocean floor. And there is that press conference with the US Coast Guard at 8 o'clock. We'll be bringing you that live this evening. Let's begin, though, with the latest information that we have and the story so far.
We were notified that it was overdue and it had 5 persons on board.
The search for the missing sub continues, now more in hope than expectation. This evening, the US Coast Guard told the world that debris has been found in the search area. It's reported to be the landing frame and rear cover of the sub. If there are survivors, it would be a miracle. The crew set off from St. John's in Newfoundland, Canada on Friday. They were on an expedition to view the Titanic and travelled a distance of around 435 miles. On Sunday morning, the sub began its descent towards the Titanic, which lies at a depth of 3,800 metres. But just 1 hour and 45 minutes later, all communication was lost. The vessel was missing. There's been no contact since.
We're doing everything that we can do.
There's an enormous complexity associated with this case.
It is a remote area.
Our thoughts and prayers are with the crew of the Titan and their loved ones.
We're making the best use of every moment.
The Titan sub is believed to have had 96 hours of oxygen on board. The clock was ticking, and the frantic search to save the 5 passengers began.
You always have hope. That's why we're doing what we do.
OceanGate Expeditions offers you the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
The expedition was billed like something from a Hollywood movie.
This is not a thrill ride for tourists. It's much more.
And would cost passengers thousands of pounds.
There's truly nothing else like it.
The man offering this deep ocean experience is founder and CEO of OceanGate, Stockton Rush.
We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on!
He was on board the vessel when it went missing, along with 4 others.
I love adventure. I've been lucky enough to get opportunities in my life to do adventurous things.
British billionaire adventurer Hamish Harding, former French Navy officer Paul-Henri Nargeolet, and wealthy British businessman Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Solomon.
I think understood on the one hand that this was, not without its risks, but I think he was confident in the technology and felt that this was, an opportunity of a lifetime.
The search has now covered 14,000 square miles, an area twice the size of the state of Connecticut. Underwater robot vehicles are scouring the ocean floor. The rescue mission is still underway, but as the minutes and hours tick by, the hope of there being any survivors fades.
That's Danny Sinha with the very latest information. And if you're just joining us tonight, a reminder, we're hoping to hear live from the US Coast Guard. They're going to be giving an update at 8 o'clock our time. Let's take you through some of the detail about this Titan submersible, though. But it has been an overwhelmingly difficult task looking for it. Forget looking for a needle in a haystack. Experts from around the world have been searching for a needle in a million haystacks in pitch black darkness underwater. They do have, though, some very advanced technology on their side. Now, the search area has been in the remote part of the Atlantic, 435 miles south of Newfoundland, across, as you can see, a huge area. US and Canadian agencies, navies and commercial deep-sea firms are all helping the rescue operation. There are also specialists from the UK, and there are 2 RAF planes involved. Now, among the many ships that are there, the Titan's mothership at the top there, the Polar Prince, Deep Energy, which is a commercial cable-laying ship, and the French research vessel L'Atalante. Now, this one is key at the bottom here. There it is, because on board is a robot called Victor 6000, and it can reach depths of, as you can see, 6,000 metres. It has remote-controlled arms which are able to cut cables. In the air above all this, C-130s, Boeing P-8s and Canadian P-3s, and these are the ones that picked up those banging noises you might have heard about over the last few days. They've been dropping sonar buoys into the water, listening for more sounds. We now know that debris has been found near the Titanic wreck. That is 3,800 metres down. Now, to put that in context, get this in your head. Imagine 3 Burj Khalifas, that's the world's biggest building, 2 Empire State Buildings on top of that, 1 Eiffel Tower and Big Ben all stacked together on top of each other. That gives you a bit of context for how deep down we're going. Well, joining us now live this evening from St John's in Newfoundland in Canada is Jackie Goddard. Jackie, really good to speak to you live on the programme. Jackie is a US correspondent for The Times and has also interviewed Hamish Harding, one of those on board. Jackie, thank you so much. I know it's been an incredibly busy day for you, and I know it's a really difficult question to ask as well, but give us an idea of the mood and how optimistic or pessimistic things are at the moment.
Well, there are 2 layers of this. There's the layer where behind the public facade maybe of hope. There's dwindling hope and reality that there's going to be a miracle here. The debris field that has been reported, we're waiting for an update from the Coast Guard in Boston that is overseeing the search and rescue operation as to whether that debris field is 100% connected to the disappearance of OceanGate's Titan submersible. There is some talk from among the exploration community and sources that I've spoken to that this might have been an undercarriage and engine cowling from a prior dive. We don't yet have specific clarity on that, so I'm being urged, be cautious until we have chapter and verse. The mood, though, is one still of you never give up. You never give up until you have something confirmed or a reality in front of you. And at the moment, there's just still this clutching at miracles. These are 5 souls still potentially on a submersible where, sure, maybe the air supply may have gone beyond its expiration point, but maybe, just maybe, they were innovative enough to have done something to preserve some of that supply. Maybe the bangs that they've been hearing from the seafloor, or they think from the seafloor, were still signs that there was hope and life still down there. So there's still that the grimness of, people know the reality they're almost certainly dealing with, but not really quite ready to give up, and they still want to bring their brethren home.
Of course, there is still hope, and we'll get that update, hopefully, you were talking about from the US Coast Guard in about 45 minutes' time. As we said, you have interviewed Hamish Harding, the billionaire who's on board before. Give us an idea of the type of man that he is, and the sort of explorer that he is.
He's a lovely, delightful chap. He's a very accomplished aviator. A spaceman, as you're showing there. He's very humble. So he has this fascination and curiosity about planet Earth, and he has the means to explore it, to pay to join these experiences. And then he's always been eager to share them with others. When I last spoke to him, he was giving me advice for my little boy, who is also into aviation, and telling me to tell him, keep looking at your studies at school, even if you don't find some of the subjects inspiring, because they are your pathway to finding something that does inspire you. And in this case, aviation. He's very measured and logical. He flies complicated machines himself as a pilot, and he trusts in technology, but not in a irrational kind of way. So it's particularly, I think, sad to see this this kind of an incident befalling him, when he is somebody who really trusted in technology and trusted in others' expertise, and had a great deal of his own too.
Jackie, really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. That's Jackie Goddard joining us live from Newfoundland tonight on our special programme. She's a US correspondent for The Times. Now, it may sound obvious, but above everything, of course, as Jackie's been telling us, this is a human story. A story about 5 people trapped deep underneath the Atlantic Ocean, and of their families who are desperate for news tonight. Let's go into a bit more detail about the people that we know on board. We've just heard about Hamish Harding, a British billionaire and avid adventurer. He qualified as a pilot in the mid-1980s and now runs a private jet dealership called Action Aviation. As Jackie was telling us, he's a very experienced explorer, visiting the South Pole with friend and former astronaut Buzz Aldrin. He was also the first British space tourist, blasting off on board Blue Origin just last year. On top of all that, he holds 3 Guinness World Records, including one for the longest time spent at the deepest part of any ocean anywhere, more than 4 hours, almost 11,000 metres down. Hamish was originally meant to take a trip to view the Titanic back in June of 2022, but that was delayed after the Titan submersible was damaged on a previous dive. When he was asked about his attitude to adventure, this is what he said. "My view is that these are calculated risks and are well understood before we start." Among the other British passengers on board are these 2, father and son, Shahzada and Suleiman Dawood. 48-year-old Shahzada is a member of one of Pakistan's richest families. He's also an advisor for the Prince's Trust and works for a California-based research organisation searching for extraterrestrial life. Now, he lives with his family in Surrey, including, there he is, his 19-year-old son Suleiman, who is also on board. Now, Suleiman is a university student, and in a family statement, he's been described as a big fan of science fiction, that's literature, and learning new things. Now, with them is 77-year-old Paul-Henri Nargelot, who is known as Mr. Titanic. The former French Navy diver is director of underwater research at the company that owns the rights to the Titanic wreck. He is said to have spent more time at that wreck than any other explorer, and was part of the first expedition to visit it in 1987, just 2 years after it was found. So that's Paul-Henri Nargelot. And finally, we come to the man responsible for the submersible, and that is the 61-year-old chief executive and founder of Ocean Gate. There he is, Stockton Rush. He reportedly goes on every dive it runs. In an interview last year, he said appropriate safety measures were being taken. And if you just want to be safe, he says, don't get out of bed. Well, Stockton's wife, Wendy, is actually the great-great-granddaughter of 2 passengers who were on board the Titanic when it sank. With us in the studio now is Steve Aitken, a former Royal Navy submarine commander, and also Julie Cook, who is an author and broadcaster who's written about the Titanic and was actually due to go on the Titan before the pandemic, and that was forced, one of those trips, to be cancelled. Thank you so much to both of you for coming in tonight. I know this is very much a developing story, and you, like the rest of us, are all waiting to see what the US Coast Guard says at 8 o'clock tonight, and we will take that live. Steve, what we found out in the last few hours is the reports of this debris that's been found. I mean, whichever way you look at it, we don't know exactly that it's from the Titan yet, but what sort of news and how do you interpret that news?
Look, I think our thoughts and prayers go because there is still hope. Until the moment the hope isn't there, we need to look at that. I think the key to this is that there is indeed some debris that's been identified either from the Titan or from a similar sort of submersible. So obviously the Coast Guard are concerned about that, to do that as well. What we need to do is have that detail to do that as well. But what we do know is the atmosphere control on board that submersible had probably reached a critical point. And the questions we need to be asking is, at what point do we shift from what is in essence a rescue mission to a recovery mission? And I hope it's still a rescue mission.
And give us an idea as well, an indication of just how difficult. We saw the size and the scale of it, didn't we, before? But how astonishingly difficult this has been to find something so small in such a vast area.
Listen, it is an absolutely tiny target to find in the vastness of the ocean. And also it's falling in the debris field that is the Titanic. When the Titanic came down, it broke into two and it spread over a considerable area, a lot of debris from the internals of the ship. So actually, when all that has gone to the bottom, if the submersible is against that as well, it's going to be a very, very difficult target to pick up. And of course, we hoped, and we do hope, that indeed they were able to hear banging inside the submersible, and that should have been able to geolocate it to a small area. Okay. But we have to send the ROVs down to try and find it and actually identify it. And I think the US Coast Guard, that's what they were doing, and that's what they'll be reporting tonight.
Julie, it does feel, doesn't it, like we're holding on to hope, but it does feel like hope is fading. I wonder what sort of thoughts are rattling through your mind, because you could have been on a trip on that very vessel, couldn't you, a few years ago?
Yes, I mean, I echo what you said here, that I'm still hopeful. I think you've always got to be hopeful, and I really, really do hope they come back. But yes, in 2021, I was approached to go on one of the trips, one of the maiden trips of Titan, by a documentary company in America. One, because I'm a journalist, but two, because I'm the great-granddaughter of a stoker from the Titanic. So I said yes as a journalist. I was scared as a person of going on there, but in my job I said yes to it. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen for various reasons, post-pandemic travel, visas, that kind of thing. Now I'm incredibly relieved I didn't go on that trip, feeling incredibly worried about the people on there, and like I've been quite lucky not to. But yeah, it makes the question: should you be looking at these things, I guess, at the moment as well? But I mean, mine was a personal thing as well. My great-granddad is down there somewhere. Oh,
I imagine that's part of that personal fascination for you, to have had a relative who was actually on the Titanic.
Yes, yeah. He died, he was 40, he died while he was working there. So he's somewhere in that ocean, what remains of him, yes.
OK, we'll hear more from Julie and Steve later in the programme. Thank you very much for the moment. As you can see on the screen there is a live press conference, if you're just joining us, which is scheduled for 8 o'clock tonight, where we're hoping to hear from the US Coast Guard. We're going to take a short break for you now. When we come back, we'll look into the company behind this trip to the Titanic. And of course, we'll bring you any more information as we get it tonight. We do know from a few hours ago that debris has been found in the search area. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to our special programme tonight, the Titanic sub lost at sea. And a reminder of that latest news: debris has been discovered on the sea floor near the wreck of the Titanic. There are reports tonight that it could be a section of that Titan submersible. That has not yet been confirmed. We are expecting to hear more at a press conference from the US Coast Guard, which is scheduled for 8 o'clock tonight, and we will be staying on air to bring you that live. Normal programmes on Channel 5 will resume at around about 8:15 tonight. Right now, though, let's have a closer look at the vessel at the very centre of this story. The Titan was built specifically for tourists to visit the Titanic wreck and is one of the world's only privately owned manned submersibles able to reach depths of 4,000 metres. It's made of carbon fibre and titanium, around 22 feet long. Here are some of the statistics about the vessel. It weighs more than 10 tonnes, travels at around about 3 knots. Part of it, maybe the landing frame, this part here actually, if I can show you that, this is what they think may have come loose and appears to have been found. That's some of the reports. But again, confirmation of that maybe a little bit later on tonight. It's important to remember this is a submersible and not a submarine. Here's the difference. A submarine has enough power to leave port, produce a continuous supply of air and return by itself. A submersible, like the Titan, has limited power reserves and requires launching from a mothership. In this case, that ship we told you about earlier, the Polar Prince. Now, it can carry, the Titan, 5 people, 1 pilot, 4 crew. And they are locked inside. The hatch is closed and sealed with, if you want to count them, 17 bolts there. Just 1 domed porthole offers a view of the deep sea. Now, inside, conditions are very cramped. Have a look. There are no chairs. Each passenger sits cross-legged within arm's reach of each other. The walls are heated and, if you're interested, if nature calls, then there's a toilet blocked off by a thin curtain, and apparently the pilot then turns up the music for a bit of extra privacy. And navigation is equally rudimentary. GPS doesn't work 4,000 metres down. Instead, the pilot relies on text messages which are sent from that surface boat, remember we told you about, to help guide the vessel. The pilot then steers the submersible using a modified video game controller. Now, the price for this trip is extremely high-end, £195,000 per person. It's a 10-day expedition, and normally it would include some time underwater looking at the Titanic remains, somewhere between 8 and 11 hours. Those are some of the main statistics tonight. Joining us from the Peak District is David Russell, a former Royal Navy Commodore who led the British efforts to rescue the Russian nuclear submarine Kursk, you might remember. David, really good to talk to you tonight. Many of our viewers will remember the Kursk, which sunk. Many of the crew were obviously on there at the time. In the end, the Russian authorities, they were very slow to react, weren't they? And 117 sailors died in the end. Give us an idea of what that was like to be involved in that.
Well, I think it's quite different to what's going on at the moment because, for a start, we knew exactly where the Kursk was. Our problem was persuading the Russians that it would be appropriate for us to help them rescue their sailors. So our problem was at least political as well as technical, and obviously we have the same pressure of time. I think that's the common feature in all submarine rescue type operations. You are really running against the clock from the moment you think there's an accident until the last moment when you think you have found the submarine and maybe be able to effect a rescue.
Yeah, our guests in the studio were talking about the difficulty of finding the Titan. And the main difference, obviously, apart from all the different circumstances, was you knew where the Kursk was. In this case, you've got to find the Titan in a vast area.
Yeah, and it really is difficult. I mean, even if the Titan has got to the surface, as you can see, the waves are very big in the Atlantic, and we're looking for an object that is probably going to project above the surface, but no more than a large microwave type size. So to see it or to detect it by radar is extremely difficult. If the submersible is on the ocean floor, you have a similar problem. The search vessels, the ROVs, can only move fairly slowly. They can't see very far. And as you pointed out, all kinds of things don't work underwater, like radar and GPS, certainly not at 4,000 meters. So you have to use some pretty rudimentary techniques in a way of looking and trying to locate the vessel is extremely difficult. And the knocking noises we heard, we thought, could have been from the vessel, but it equally could have been from biological sources. There are fish that make noises that sound terribly realistic, like banging noises. So it's not an easy prospect, whether it's looking for something at the surface or on the seabed.
David, really appreciate your recollections and your expertise tonight. That's David Russell, former Royal Navy Commodore, who's been talking us live on the programme tonight. And as this story has developed throughout the week, more and more questions have emerged about the company which owns the Titan. Questions over things like safety, about costs, threatened legal action and more. And the boss of OceanGate is on board the vessel, as we know. Stockton Rush has been running trips to view the Titanic since 2021. Here's Julian Drucker with more.
OceanGate Expeditions offers you the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be a specially trained crew member safely diving to the Titanic wreckage site.
Titanic tourism is offered by OceanGate. Despite recent events, the company's website is seemingly still offering people the chance to witness the world's most famous wreckage. Trips started 2 years ago and cost just under £200,000.
It's its own category. It's a new type of travel.
Oh. An American news crew met the company's founder and CEO, Stockton Rush, last November. They went inside the submersible and were surprised by some of the features on board.
We can use these off-the-shelf components. I got these from Camper World. We run the whole thing with this game controller.
Come on! You get there and then you start seeing this stuff, and now your mood crashes and you get a little worried. Like, is this the level of polish? You are bolted in from the outside. There are 18 bolts in a circle around the hatch. And by the way, they only fasten 17 of them. The 18th one is way up high, and they say there's really no mathematical difference.
So what was the OceanGate experience like for someone who dived thousands of miles under the sea with them?
You must be crazy to do things like this. I agree, I'm crazy sometimes.
German adventurer Arthur Leubel paid to visit the Titanic wreck in August 2021. This was him on the right, on board. In the middle, Stockton Rush. And on the left, French explorer Paul-Henri Nargeolet, who's also missing.
It takes 2.5 hours. It was totally no light. We're sitting in the dark. You are very, very nervous. But when we reached the bottom, it was... you got a happiness, you got a good feeling. And we saw on the map that we only 600 feet from the Titanic, and we saw it like the famous pictures all over the world. It was amazing.
OceanGate, based in Washington State, has only commented in the last few days to reflect on the hopeful return of its crew members. Arthur Leubel claims he was asked to invest in the company.
I think they have problems, financial problems, and also Stockton was asking me last year whether I would come into the company. My opinion is they have too less money to make the sub more safe. And he was talking about, I think, 5 or 10 million euros.
There's no other trip like this.
Deep sea exploration carries huge dangers. The growing sector of adventure tourism will now find itself under even greater scrutiny, whatever the outcome of the Titan incident.
Well, Julian Drucker with that report, talking about whatever the outcome might be. Let's show you a live shot from St John's tonight. This is actually where the Titan, on board the Polar Prince, of course, the mothership, was launched a few days ago. And a reminder on the screen that we might know more from a live press conference, which is going to be from the US Coast Guard, taking place in Boston, where things are being run from at 8 o'clock tonight. So less than half an hour away. And hopefully we'll get a bit more detail about that debris they've been speaking about in the last few hours, and any more information that they have about the Titan and those 5 men on board. Back in the studio, we've got former Navy Commander Steve Aitken, who's still with us, and we'll be joined by journalist Martin Phillips, who took part in a dive to the Titanic in a Russian submersible. This was a couple of years ago, wasn't it, Martin?
This was 22 years ago. Yeah.
OK, give us an idea of what that experience was like.
Quite remarkable. Rather like everyone said, I mean, the risks are spelt out for you before.
And you're well aware of that?
Well aware of the risks, and they spell out in no uncertain terms that, you know, they're going to put you in a flame-proof overalls because of the oxygen-enriched atmosphere is a great danger of fire, and also the pressure down there, 380 atmospheres. If you even got a pinprick in the capsule, they said, well, the water being forced through would be like a laser, could cut you in half, but don't worry, because you'd instantly implode anyway. You know, they really laid it on with the trowel.
Okay. So you're aware of all those things.
Yeah.
I wonder, with that in your mind, what have you made of what you've seen over the last few days, and with everybody else hoping for good news?
Over the last few days, is fairly pessimistic, but tonight's news seems even more sobering.
Yeah, and Steve, to come to you, we've mentioned tonight a few times that this is a human story, and we know that every life is priceless. But I'm sure there's a lot of people who are watching this tonight, and anybody who's been on social media will have seen many comments about why a story like this gets so much attention when some of those other many boats, sometimes migrant boats, and the deaths on those vessels doesn't get the sort of attention, doesn't get special programmes. How do you square that this evening?
I can't. Because even this evening there was an announcement that there is a loss of life of nearly 40-odd people of migrants off Canaries. We've seen that fishing vessel that went down off Crete. And of course, one of the things that the relatives will want to see is those bodies recovered. But they're not going to be able to do it because they don't have the resources. Yet we have 4 or 5 deep ocean vessels out there looking for these people. And I'm not taking that away from the tragedy that this may become. And, you know, we hope they are rescued. But there has to be a balance in this. And look, you know, the prayer is there. Those in peril on the sea, or indeed those in peril under the sea, those are real issues and things that we need to seriously think about.
Yeah, and we all hope for good news, don't we? But as Steve is saying, all life is precious, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, all those different considerations, but the people searching for the passengers of the Titan, they're only interested in that. There are people in danger, so they're doing their best to try and save them.
Appreciate your time again for the moment. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you a bit later on. Time for another break for you now. When we come back, the latest news from the US Coast Guard. Plus, the temptation of the Titanic. We'll be talking to the first British person to dive down to see the wreck. We'll see you in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to our special programme this evening. Let's update you on what we know so far. Debris has been found by search teams looking for the Titan tonight. There is a press conference starting at 8 o'clock this evening in Boston by US Coast Guard. This is the live scene from St John's where the Titan left on Sunday. We're going to be bringing you that press conference live in around about 20 minutes' time. They have been very accurate, the US Coast Guard, as to when they start those press conferences. So hopefully 8 o'clock this evening for some more detail. But of course, ever since the Titanic sunk on that maiden voyage back in 1912 with the loss of more than 1,500 lives, it's held a very special fascination for millions of people. It's one of the biggest films of all time. Vast exhibitions dedicated to the ship, and it has tempted scores of divers to visit the wreckage.
As people know, the Titanic sank on the 15th of April 1912. Ever since that day, it is a story that keeps being told. She's the most expensive ship, she's the biggest ship, she's the best we can do. And then we wheel her out on her maiden voyage, and what happens? It crashed into an iceberg in the North Atlantic. 1,500 people lost their lives, 705 people survived. I think with Titanic there's this ongoing sense of drama, and one can't help reading these accounts of what happened and thinking, how would I act in that situation? What would that be like? And that's constantly fascinating.
I think part of the reason people are so obsessed with the Titanic because some of the world's richest people were on this ship. The romance of it all is something that sticks with people.
To put into perspective the most expensive cabins on Titanic, in today's money they'd be £50,000. She had the widest dining room on the Atlantic. She had one of the first swimming pools to be on board ship. She had a gymnasium at a time when personal fitness was just coming into fashion for the Edwardians. What you've got is this cross-section through society, which makes learning about Titanic so fascinating.
I stumbled upon this story of Joseph Larache, who was the only Black passenger on the Titanic, and I was fixated on this story. I did not know that there were any Black people on the Titanic.
I think when Bob Ballard found the Titanic in 1985, it was really a seminal moment. It again brought Titanic to a new audience.
When they found the wreckage, it was like finding a needle in the haystack.
And it wasn't until we had the sonar technology and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute went out with Bob Ballard, but after he found the wreck, he wanted it hidden. He didn't want it to become a tourist attraction. I think one of the biggest phenomena that has brought Titanic to a modern audience is James Cameron's brilliant film in 1997, which really brought the ship to life. Titanic had a lot of wealthy and glamorous passengers. John Jacob Astor was one of the richest men in the world.
That's John Jacob Astor, the richest man on the ship.
Even to someone like myself who knows a lot about it, I think visually it's extremely accurate.
I think that people have always seen the Titanic as a cautionary tale, as a cultural cautionary tale of what happens when you try to become bigger than nature. And I think it's a cautionary tale in the sense that it shows you that wealth cannot always save you.
Really, the Titanic speaks to the human condition, the awesome power of nature against the ingenuity of people.
We'll get a bit more on the magic of the Titanic in a moment, but we're just going to show you this live shot from Boston at the moment. We told you about that press conference, which we are hoping to take live at 8 o'clock this evening. We'll hopefully be hearing by the podium there from Rear Admiral John Mauger and also from Captain Jamie Frederick. They're both from the US Coast Guard, and that press conference, as it says on the screen there, is scheduled for 8 o'clock this evening, so about 15 minutes away. Now, back to the Titanic, because Dick Barton was the first British man to dive to the wreck. Delighted to say he joins us now from his home in Carlisle. Dick, thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us on the programme tonight. Obviously, we don't know exactly what has happened to the Titan, but I'd love to talk to you about the Titanic. What is it about the wreck that makes it so appealing?
It's a bizarre, extraordinary draw. And no matter what your interest and fascination with it may be, whether it's historical or adventure or, in our case, commercial and maritime salvage, she's being epitomised now, obviously, and romanticised over the years by documentaries, movies and historians. I truly don't know what it is, but it certainly has a draw, and she's an iconic wreck of some note.
I think we've got some footage we're going to show, Dick, of what you have actually shot yourself from the Titanic. How many trips have you made? You sort of explained why you keep going back, but it is a fascination for you.
Yeah, I think in the context of what we were doing, we actually were guardians of the wreck. We were the maritime appointed guardians under salvage law as the custodians by RMS Titanic Incorporated. And as such, our obligation was to map the wreck, map her deterioration, recover artifacts, map the wreck site, and then take those artifacts on public display around the world. She's just an extraordinary wreck, and 22 times I've been down there, and every single time was something different. But we had many dive plans, and we thought it through, and safety was paramount to us every time we went down.
And Dick, I know you're a former colleague as well of Paul-Henri Nargeolet, who is on the vessel, of course. Tell us a little bit about him and what you know of him.
Well, we first started diving as RMS Titanic back in '93, and we contracted Ifremer, and PH was leading the underwater activities. He's an extraordinarily qualified, very, very experienced submariner, ex-French Navy, a robust and strong individual, a great explorer. He was a great mentor to me, and he was a really good man to have on your side. We had some fun experiences. With 37 dives on the wreck, he knew the wreck and the wreck site just so incredibly well, and was just a great, solid piece of advice. And he always helped, no matter what your thoughts were, and was a very calming influence.
Well, Dick, I really hope that you and his family get to see him again. Thank you very much for sharing your memories of your own time at the Titanic. Really appreciate being on the programme tonight. In the studio now, we're joined by Dr. Nikolai Roterman, who's a marine scientist. Thank you again for your time this evening. Give us an idea of conditions down there. What's it like thousands of metres below the surface?
Yeah, well, the first thing is the deep sea is really defined as a dark place. So 90% of light is absorbed in the top 200 metres, and 99% of light is absorbed in the top 1,000 metres. So at 3.5 or 3,800 metres depth, it's completely black. There's no light. It's also incredibly cold. So temperatures typically around 2 to 4 degrees centigrade. And obviously you have the extreme pressure at 380 times atmospheric pressure.
OK, so the vessel is under extreme sort of pressure. We've heard the stories about potentially this debris, which has sort of come away, we think. We're not have that confirmed yet. Is there any chance that that might have been released to try and help with the safety of the mission? Is that a possibility?
At this stage, it's entirely possible that that was jettisoned to effect some kind of escape to the surface.
OK, and when you have seen what you've heard over the last 4 days, where does your mind take you? Because nobody, particularly the families, can't let go of hope. But at the moment, it doesn't look particularly positive, does it?
No, I think we're all hopeful. Anyone that's ever been in a deep sea submersible, our hearts go out to the crew and the family and the friends. It taps into some of our worst nightmares, I think. Yeah, it's a very difficult situation, and I have to say, as a deep-sea ecologist, I'm quite aware of how difficult it is to retrieve objects from that depth.
OK, well, hopefully we'll get an update from the US Coast Guard in around about 10 minutes or so, but thank you very much for being with us tonight. Now, next we're going to talk about adventure, exploration or tourism, because there's been a dramatic rise in the number of people going to extreme lengths to visit places which were once considered out of reach, and it comes at a huge price and potentially a huge cost. From the highest mountain peaks to the deepest depths of the ocean, extreme tourism is a phenomenon for travellers around the world, and even out of it.
Exciting day, we're going to space.
But what is the attraction?
I think the motivations are inherent in all of us. If we had the money, we may do it, whether it's for adrenaline, whether it's for thrill-seeking, whether it's for being the first to do something, will always motivate us. Having that first flight into outer space, for example, is the pioneering tourism. There'll always be, as there was in early travel, risks involved with that, and the risks will simply not go away.
Nepal issued more climbing permits for Everest this year than ever before, and 100,000 people are expected to visit Antarctica this summer. But not everyone thinks these remote places should be tourist destinations.
I would be all in favor of making certain that people are properly educated, properly prepared, properly respectful of the places that they are going to, and not to treat them like they're going to Disney World.
Dr. Michael Guillen has been to many of these places as a scientist and journalist, including visiting the wreckage of the Titanic with a Russian expedition.
It took about 2.5 hours. We toured the bow. It was extremely emotional.
His voyage nearly ended in disaster and was captured in this incredible footage.
We had actually got caught in a high-speed underwater current, and that caused us to slam right into the propeller and get lost behind the blades.
Oh my gosh, so are we stuck or what?
We were in a really dire situation.
Despite the risks, the world's wealthiest thrill seekers are pushing the boundaries of tourism.
Oh my! Extreme tourism is a commodity for consumption. It's very much a preserve of the wealthy at the moment, but eventually it will become a kind of a mass product.
Visiting the Titanic costs nearly £200,000 per person, and going to space can be as much as £400,000. For the elite few who can afford it, is it worth it?
There'll always be those frontier-seeking people who will want to push the boundaries, to want to be the first, to want to have so-called bragging rights, but also genuinely want to be in a place that no one else has perhaps been.
Ollie France is the owner of an extreme tourism company. Thank you very much for being with us on the programme. You don't do deep-sea trips, Ollie, but you do all sorts of other trips all over the planet. What do you think the appeal is?
Well, people go and have these adventures for many, many reasons. And I think in a philosophical sense, exploration is a deeply human endeavour. We wouldn't have populated the world, we wouldn't have scaled the highest mountains, explored space, the deep ocean, without this deep human sense of exploration. So I think sometimes it is that innate drive, and sometimes on a more personal level, it's a case of pushing ourselves. We do live in a relatively comfortable world right now. So the opportunity to go and do something different, to experience places that haven't been seen before, that is a real appeal. And
I think there's been a lot of focus, hasn't there, on the sort of the richness of those people who are in the vessel, the Titan, and how much they've spent to be there. But from your experience, it's not just the billionaires of this world who are looking for that sort of rush, I suppose.
Absolutely not. And I've had the privilege of working with hundreds of travellers from all different backgrounds and different levels of wealth, and their reasons are, you know, all very, very interesting. And essentially, it's this sense that, yes, you can buy anything if you've got billions of dollars in the bank. But, you know, if you go on one of these experiences, have a life-changing journey, that's going to stay with you forever. It can't be taxed, it can't be stolen. It's something really special that, you know, you can't put a price on those experiences.
OK, Ollie, I wonder if what we've seen this week will have an impact on the extreme tourism business. That'll be interesting to see, won't it?
It will be interesting to see how this plays out. You know, there may be a slowdown potentially. However, you know, in the history of exploration, there have been many incidents just like this, and you know, still we see it continuing.
OK, thank you, Ollie. We're on air until 8:15 tonight. We're going to bring you that press conference with the latest developments on the story. As we've been saying, we think part of the Titan, maybe the landing frame, has been found. We're showing you these pictures now. This is live from Boston, where that update will be given in just a couple of minutes' time. We'll be back after the break. Welcome back to this special programme, the Titanic sub lost at sea. A reminder for you, we're going to remain on air tonight for a press conference from the US Coast Guard, which we are expecting to start at around 8 o'clock, so just a couple of minutes' time. Normal programmes will resume at 8:15 on Channel 5. This is Boston, the live shot you can see now. We're going to be hearing, hopefully in a few minutes' time, from Rear Admiral John Malga and from Captain Jamie Frederick from the US Coast Guard. But I'm sorry to say that we have just received this statement from OceanGate. And remember, OceanGate are the company who own and run Titan, the sub we've been concentrating our attention on for the past 4 days. This is the entire statement. I'll read it to you. We now believe that our CEO, Stockton Rush, Shahzada Dawood and his son, Suleiman, Hamish Harding and Paul-Henri Nargeolet have sadly been lost. These men, they say, were true explorers who shared a distinct spirit of adventure and a deep passion for exploring and protecting the world's oceans. Our hearts are with these 5 souls and every member of their families during this tragic time. We grieve the loss of life and joy they brought to everyone they knew. They continue to say it's a sad time for our dedicated employees who are exhausted and grieving deeply over this loss. The entire OceanGate family is deeply grateful for the countless men and women from multiple organisations of the international community who expedited wide-ranging resources and have worked so very hard on this mission. We appreciate their commitment to finding these 5 explorers and their days and nights of tireless work to support our crew and their families. This is a very sad time for the entire explorer community and for each of the family members of those lost at sea. So that is a statement just in the last couple of minutes we've received from OceanGate. And just to reiterate, they say that they believe that all 5 men on board have sadly now been lost. We will go to that press conference from the US Coast Guard as and when it starts. Former Navy Commander, in fact, this is, you can see the US Coast Guard there. They're getting ready for that press conference. I don't know if it's about to begin. Hopefully we can go and listen in. This is what the US Coast Guard have got to say. Let's have a listen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and over the past few days. This afternoon, Rear Admiral John Mauger will be providing an update on the most recent findings from ROV operations in search of the Titan submersible. He will provide a brief statement and provide the opportunity for questions after. Please limit your questions to 1 per outlet. Following the briefing, the Joint Information Center staff and I will be here to help you with any of your further needs. May I now please introduce Rear Admiral John Mauger.
This morning, an ROV, or remote operated vehicle, from the vessel Horizon Arctic discovered the tail cone of the Titan submersible approximately 1,600 feet from the bow of the Titanic on the seafloor. The ROV subsequently found additional debris. In consultation with experts from within the Unified Command, the debris is consistent with the catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber. Upon this determination, we immediately notified the families. On behalf of the United States Coast Guard and the entire Unified Command, I offer my deepest condolences to the families. I can only imagine what this has been like for them, and I hope that this discovery provides some solace during this difficult time. Additionally, we've been in close contact with the British and French consuls general to ensure that they are fully apprised and that their concerns are being addressed. The outpouring of support in this highly complex search operation has been robust and immensely appreciated. We are grateful for the rapid mobilization of experts on the undersea search and rescue, and we thank all of the agencies and personnel for their role in the response. We're also incredibly grateful for the full spectrum of international assistance that's been provided. The ROVs will remain on scene and continue to gather information. Again, our most heartfelt condolences go out to the loved ones of the crew. We'll now take questions.
Rear Admiral, can you talk about the delay in reporting the vessel missing and what impact that had on the recovery?
This was a incredibly complex case, and we're still working to develop the details for the timeline involved with this casualty and the response. And so we'll provide that information.
About the recovery of the body. James Matthews from Sky News. John, what other debris have you found? And have you found any trace?
Complex. So this is an incredibly complex operating environment on the seafloor, over 2 miles beneath the surface. And so the remote operating vehicle has been searching, and it is highly capable. And we've been able to classify parts of the pressure chamber for the Titan submersible. Let me refer to one of my undersea experts here, Mr. Paul Hankin, to talk about the nature of some of the debris.
Thank you, Admiral. So essentially we found 5 different major pieces of debris that told us that it was the remains of the Titan. The initial thing we found was the nose cone, which was outside of the pressure hull. We then found a large debris field. Within that large debris field, we found the front end bell of the pressure hull. That was the first indication that there was a catastrophic event. Shortly thereafter, we found a second smaller debris field. Within that debris field, we found the other end of the pressure hull, the aft end bell, which was basically comprised of the totality of that pressure vessel. We continue to map the debris field, and as the Admiral said, we will do the best we can to fully map out what's down there.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, sir. Go ahead. It's a very difficult question to ask, but it will be an important one for the families, of course. What are the prospects of recovering the bodies of the missing?
So the questions was related. I'm restating the question from the standpoint of sometimes it's hard to hear the question here. What are the prospects for recovering crew members? And so this is a incredibly unforgiving environment down there on the seafloor, and the debris is consistent with a catastrophic implosion of the vessel. And so we'll continue to work and continue to search the area down there, but I don't have an answer for prospects at this time.
Admiral, it's Tom Costello at NBC News. Is there any suggestion? Any suggestion at all that the sub itself collided with the wreckage of Titanic, or that instead it might have imploded above the wreckage and then rained down nearby?
So the question was, is there any question as to whether or not the sub collided with the Titanic or whether it imploded above and debris field created from that? So the location of the Titan submersible was in an area that was approximately 1,600 feet from the wreck of the Titanic. I have an expert here that is familiar with that area and can talk about the debris field and what the debris field indicates in terms of where the casualty may have occurred.
Rear Admiral, really quickly, can you tell me when that massive fleet will be called back?
The expert voice is coming up to answer the question.
Thank you, Admiral. So the question is, where does the wreck lie in relation to the Titanic? I didn't hear the Admiral's answer. I think 1,600 feet. Was that correct, Admiral?
Yep, you got it.
So that's off the bow of Titanic. It's in an area where there is not any debris of Titanic. It is a smooth bottom. To my knowledge and anything I've seen, there's no Titanic wreckage in that area. And again, 200 plus meters from the bow, and consistent with the location of last communication for an implosion in the water column. And the size of the debris field is consistent with that implosion in the water column.
Thanks.
What would cause the implosion? In terms of the timing here, you say that this was a catastrophic implosion. And I know it's early on, but is it your estimation that this happened right at the moment when they lost contact, an hour and 45 minutes after the descent?
So the question was about the timing of the catastrophic implosion. Right now, it is too early to tell with that. We know that as we've been prosecuting this search over the course of the last 72 hours and beyond, that we've had sonar buoys in the water nearly continuously and have not detected any catastrophic events when those sonar buoys have been in the water. So.
That is Rear Admiral John Morgan from the US Coast Guard and several of his colleagues as well, addressing the world's media. And I suppose it's the news that many people, particularly the families of those 5 men on board, have been dreading over the last few days. The sad news of the death of all 5 of those on board. In the studio, we're joined by former Navy Commander Steve Aitken and Dr. Nikolai Roterman, who's a marine scientist. I saw both of you bow your heads when you heard that news from John Mauger about what he described a catastrophic loss of the pressure chamber of the Titan. There's no way anybody can survive that at those depths.
And I think if there is anything for the families, it would have happened very, very quickly. It is very sad, and particularly for the people who have been out trying to do the rescue, and indeed for those families to come to this sort of juncture. And I think they're in our thoughts and prayers. And we have an expression in the submarine service about those who go to sea and don't come back, always on patrol. And regrettably tonight, we've just added another 5 people to that list.
And Nikolai, we obviously think very deeply of what the families are going through at the moment. I suppose it's the news that we have been dreading for quite a few days. And when you heard about that structural failure of the cone, that's when you looked at each other and you said, well, that's the moment, isn't it, when the vessel has failed?
There'll be a time and a place for engineers and material scientists to debate and discuss about the design of the submersible. But it was a highly unorthodox design, perhaps groundbreaking. But there'll be a discussion for that in the future. But it does seem that there has been a catastrophic implosion during the descent.
And there will be loads of questions asked, Steve, and there'll be lots of discussion now over the next few days and months ahead. But essentially, tonight, the most important news is that those families of those 5 men are looked after and they're comforted in their deep and distressing loss.
I cannot imagine what they're feeling at the present moment in time because, for some of us, we always had a degree of hope. We thought there might have been some hope for what could have happened, but now we have had the news, and I think all of them will be in our thoughts and prayers for everybody this evening.
Steve, Nikolai, thank you very much for your care and attention and honesty and insight this evening, and to all our guests as well. Thank you for watching. It was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, wasn't it? The chance to see something few people would ever dream of. The chance to go somewhere that few people would ever dare to go. Well, tonight, 4 days after the Titan sub went missing, we finally had the news that we've all been dreading. I'm sure you've been dreading watching tonight as well. All 5 men on board have sadly lost their lives. The Ocean Gate founder and CEO Stockton Rush, former French Navy diver Paul-Henri Nargelot, 19-year-old Suleiman Dawood, the top right of your screen there, and his father, businessman Shahzada Dawood, the adventurer Hamish Harding as well. 5 men who the world had been praying for the last 4 days. 5 families who very much will be in all our thoughts tonight. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you to all our guests, and from all of us, have a good night.